Hey, so did you hear that Marvel Rivals is dying? Sucks to say it, but according to this Forbes article, the player count is down 85%, which sounds pretty dire. I mean, 85%, that must mean that there's almost nobody left playing it. Right? Right? Hello and welcome back to Kyle's Pet Peeve Corner. So I've been playing a lot of Marvel Rivals. I've been playing arguably too much Marvel Rivals. I'm in the system now, I've got to finish the battle pass, I've got to clean up all the live events to get all those free goodies. I've been sucked in. Also, not to brag or anything, but I just hit Diamond 3, so I'm basically a pro. You can understand then why it might be concerning to me to hear that the game is dying. I quite like the game, I would prefer that it didn't die. Well, thankfully then, it's not. It's just not. Wanna know how I know? Because I'm still playing it. From a user endpoint, Marvel Rivals is pretty much the exact same as it was 10 months ago. Yes, there's been rebalances and quality of life changes that are nice, but the big highlight for me and a lot of people on launch was how fast the matchmaking was, with almost no wait times to find a match. This is because the player count was so high, and, well, it still takes me seconds to find a match in quick play. But how can that be? The game has lost 85% of its player count. That's such a high percentage! This number has been floating around in a bunch of articles, primarily this Forbes article, and like most statistics, it's very misleading. For one thing, this number is specifically tied to Steam. People playing through Xbox or PlayStation or the Epic Store or through NetEase's own storefront are not included. Steam is the only platform that makes these numbers publicly available. There are methods for estimating players on these other platforms, but the 85% statistic specifically only comes from Steam. And while Steam is the most popular platform on PC, these statistics are still only a fraction of the total player base, which is deliberately unknowable. But it is generally assumed that for a cross-platform game like this, Steam statistics represent less than half of the total player counts. However, even factoring all of that in, the current Steam numbers are actually great. I know an 85% drop sounds really bad, but there's a reason this is framed as a percentage and not the actual numbers. Marvel Rivals peaked on Steam in January with 644,000 players. It's currently sitting at a daily average of around 75 to 85,000 players. That's an 85% drop, but 80,000 players still puts Rivals as the 9th most popular game on Steam. Double Overwatch 2's daily average and about 20,000 more than Team Fortress 2. Two hero shooters which have been around for years, and you will note, are not dead, nor do they show any signs of dying anytime soon. TF2 is especially noteworthy because while it did once upon a time have a console release, the game's primary player base is Steam, so half of Marvel Rivals' player base is still more than all of TF2, a game that's been going strong for almost 2 decades. The Forbes article does explain all of this, but it's giving people a lot of credit that they actually read the articles they're posting before making claims on Twitter. But also, the article does include some alarmist hand-wringing in there. 98,000 players is still healthy in the context of the industry, but the problem here is the trend line, which continues to decline without hitting a floor. Losing this many players this quickly does not bode well for the idea that Rivals is going to be a long-term hit in this space, especially if production costs are high and the wild pace of new character releases each month continues. This paragraph contains many assumptions. It assumes that the trend line will continue, which is a bold assumption to make. Are we looking at the same graph, Paul? Because the graph I'm looking at pretty clearly shows that the rate of decline is slowing over time. If we look not at the spikes, but at the valleys, the game ended Season 1 with 199,000 players, Season 2 with 97,000, and then Season 3 with 101,000. And as mentioned, it's currently sitting around 80,000. Now, that is a drop, but it's a pretty substantially smaller drop than previously, which to me would indicate that the rate of players dropping the game is slowing down. Also, if production costs are high, that's a big if there, because we have no idea how much Rivals costs to maintain, nor how much money it's making. Neither figure is public. But I will say, anecdotally, that Marvel Rivals is one of the most active live service games I've ever played. A new hero every month, new skins every week, and constant ongoing events and new game modes and all sorts. These are the symptoms of a game with a surplus of cash, not a lack of it. So what does this 85% figure actually mean? If that amount of players lost doesn't equate to the game dying, then what can we learn from it? Well, in my opinion, it shows that Marvel Rivals initially had a massively overinflated player count. 600,000 players is an absolutely bonkers statistic. There's only 3 games on Steam that maintain those kinds of player counts: PUBG, Dota 2, and Counter-Strike. You may know that these are 3 of the most popular games on the planet. The fact that Rivals was even in the running with these games temporarily is remarkable. But Rivals was never going to stay competitive with these games. These games have been around for a decade and have extremely well-established audiences. Rivals was an anomaly. It drew in a lot of players who don't normally play these sorts of games simply because it was drawing in the wider Marvel audience. A lot of those people probably aren't that invested in hero shooters and so drift off until you're left with what will become the core audience of the game. This is the natural trajectory for most live service games. Rivals just started way higher than average. As I make this video, you can see the exact same thing happening in real time with Battlefield 6. The game debuted a couple weeks ago with 747,000 players, but only a couple weeks later it's already down 400,000. A 55% drop. Everybody panic! The game is dying! Give it a few more weeks and I'm sure we'll see those headlines. The reality is, a truly dead or dying live service game doesn't have a graph that looks like this. It does not have a gradual decline, it has an extremely sharp decline. Here, for example, is the graph for Splitgate 2. You may remember that the game briefly came out this year before almost immediately going back into beta in shame because it was blatantly unfinished and full of extremely overpriced microtransactions. But in the month that it was up, you can see a couple spikes in the first days before a completely massive drop-off as everyone immediately leaves the game. You can see an equally spiky graph for Multiverses, another recent live service flop. This is what a dying live service game looks like. When they die fast. At 10 months, Marvel Rivals has already outlived the vast majority of failed live service games. Hell, you can see the same thing happen with the last Marvel live service game, that crappy Avengers game. It peaked at 31,000 and then dropped 90% in the first month. So I know it's trending down, but this chart is pretty healthy, actually. So my real question is, why is this a story? Why does it keep being a story? This is not the first article about Rivals' declining player base. There are articles like this going back at least since May. Or even more egregious, pretty much the exact same articles about Borderlands 4. And that makes even less sense than reporting on Rivals. All of the same issues as before still apply, with the added caveat that outside of co-op, Borderlands 4 is a single-player game. There's a finite amount of stuff in it. Eventually you will finish the game. I did, and when I did, I stopped playing the game. That's how single-player games work. So a substantial drop in player counts after the first month is just extremely normal. Borderlands actually keeps a higher player base than your average single-player game because there is a subset of hardcore fans who do enjoy just playing through the game over and over again and making stronger and stronger builds. But that has never been the majority of fans, which every single chart in the series demonstrates. Borderlands 4 is exactly on course with the life cycle of every other game in the series. The game has much less players than it did on the day that it came out. Yeah, no shit. That's how games work. That's how games have always worked. How is this a story? I mean, I know I'm dancing around it, but the reason is obvious, right? It's clickbait. That's the reason we keep getting all these headlines. But this isn't some shitty clickbait site like Game Rant. This is Forbes. Aren't they supposed to be like a professional news institution? Paul Tassi isn't some hack clickbait merchant. He's a real journalist who's been doing this for a decade. I've cited some of his articles before. If he feels the need to write this outrage clickbait drivel, then I take that as a very bad sign of the state of online journalism. There are so many real problems with the games industry. There are plenty of real problems with Marvel Rivals. I always play the game with voice and text chat turned off completely because the community fucking sucks. It sucks real bad. But a toxic community is not a sign that a game is dying. If it was, then there'd be a lot of dead games. Player counts are not a completely useless statistic, but they are very low on use. Because the reality is, a game is not dead until that number reaches 0. Anything above 0 means that the game is still active. I've been playing Watch_Dogs recently because I picked it up for cheap in a sale, and to my shock surprise, there's still people playing the multiplayer. Enough people that I'm getting invaded at a fairly decent rate. It's a primarily single-player game that's kind of mediocre, that came out a decade ago and has 2 sequels, but people are still playing it. It's not dead yet. I mean, it's dead to me after I bricked all the achievement tracking, forcing me to restart the game again, but I'm not bitter or anything. It's actually quite hard for a game to die. A lot of stuff has to go wrong, a lot more than some balancing issues. 85% is a lot, it sounds scary, but without any proof that that loss is affecting the game in any way, it doesn't mean anything, it's just numbers. From an experiential level, the difference between 600,000 players and 60,000 players is basically nothing. And these games provably do not need 600,000 players to stay active and to stay profitable. So, in conclusion, everyone shut up, I'm right. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some more idiot DPS mains to hard carry.
My time to shine. Everybody needs a hand sometimes. Or a dagger. Oh, merch! Another epic victory! Big win!
Thank you for watching, and a very special thank you to my wonderful patrons for your continued support. If you'd like to see your name up here, or just support the things that I do, then please consider signing up, it would mean a lot to me. As well as a like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. I've been told that it actually works, which is very exciting. If you want to see some more thoughts on Marvel Rivals, then I made a video a few months ago about some of the character design controversies. Or for something a bit different, you may have heard recently that they're thinking about hiring AI actors. Yeah, that's bollocks. Find out more down here.